Across Wales, people are already building a better future in their businesses, their communities, and everyday life. GreenWales brings those stories to life. Wales Future First brings in the voices shaping what comes next, because the future of Wales isn't something far away, it's something we're building right now together. Today, I'm joined by Andy Friars, someone who's spent years working at the heart of major events and cultural spaces, helping bring sustainability into real-world delivery. From his time with Hay Festival through to his wider work across strategy, events and stakeholder engagement, Andy's been involved in making sustainability actually happen, not just talking about it. As with every guest on Wales Future First, we'll be working through the same core set of questions, exploring how that experience connects to the long-term future of Wales, the decisions being made today, and what that means in practice. It's great to have you here today, Andy. How are you and how are things?
Things are going all right. I think, yes, we had a good successful trip down from Hay today. So, all fired up, nice breakfast and ready to be pumped for information by you.
Thank you very much. Well, we may as well get started. And the first question is, when you think about Wales in 20, 30 years, what does a good future actually look like?
I've thought long about this question. I think that Wales in 2050 feels like a place that's made peace with its geography. It's not fighting it anymore. Wind, water, community land, all working together. It means Wales accepting and believing in what it actually is, which is a small, hilly, wet, relatively sparsely populated country on the edge of Western Europe, and try not to compete on terms which just don't suit it. But honestly, I think the key issue is not necessarily economic. It's whether a young person living now in Merthyr or Llanelli or Bala can build a meaningful life there, should they want to, without having to leave. And that's, I think, is the signal. It's prosperity that it benefits directly the communities that help to generate it.
And I think that's really poignant as well, because if you think about the Welsh economy and what it is in size, I think it's well over 80% is SME.
Yep.
I think it's 75% is micro, and an even higher, well, not higher percentage, but 60% is a zero employer. So if these businesses and the economy is going to succeed, we need to support the micro economy and the micro locations all across Wales. You can't just go to Swansea, you can't just go to Cardiff or to the city areas. It's got to be wherever you live, you can become prosperous, use the landscape around you to your benefit, because you say we're a very hilly, wet place. And I think the future of Wales is actually taking advantage of those conditions. And create an economy around it.
Yeah, it's looking to see how those things give us an advantage. You know, we have, as a country, we're different to other spaces. And I think too often we're looking at other places. We need to generate this. We need to build things which require, really great, communication networks and things. And actually, where we are doesn't necessarily mean that we can do that. So let's look at what Wales does really well, and then lead into it. And also, talk to those young people, talk to those micro companies, talk to the major companies, get them working together to actually say, how do we ensure that all that amazing wealth, economic and social and cultural, actually stays in Wales, or at least most of it stays in Wales. We can't keep all of it, and you shouldn't, because we want England to keep all its wealth. We want France to keep all its wealth. It is about sharing, but it also is trying to make sure that it does directly benefit those communities which are helping to make it. If you take the coal industry over the years, most of that was extractive, literally, both from the ground and economically. And actually, if we look at those communities, where was the benefit directly to them, apart from well-paid jobs, which is important, but the long-term impact of that. How do we ensure that those long-term impacts are retained within Wales?
And again, it's our landscape, isn't it? And the legacy of what we've been left with. And I think that's what undermines a lot of Wales, is our recovery from these legacy areas. There's been lots of attempts and lots of projects to try and revitalise these areas with big, large manufacturers. But we've sort of seen that doesn't exactly lead to long-term prosperity. And what I'm seeing with the grassroots series is actually the microeconomy is really thriving, and with these new ideas, especially being aligned to the Generations Act. I'm seeing all these green shoots flying all over the place. But now let's encourage all of this to happen right across Wales and embed it throughout.
Well, if you've got a mixed economy, if you've got 100 micro businesses, and a number of them will fail, 10% fail, let's say. You've still got 90 ones which are generating income and wealth, providing employment and social cohesion. If you've got one major employer, You see it happen. They go under, and all of a sudden, an entire community loses its employment. So they aren't, whilst they do obviously generate wealth and are important, having that mix of businesses and lots of small businesses is ultimately a more secure future, because it builds in and allows for failure, whilst also making sure that everything else is keeping going.
And it gives you that resilience, and that, we talked about coal mines and the
Yep.
community. They were resilient because they were a community bounded together.
Yep.
And actually, if you've got, as you say, 90 successful micro businesses, guess what? They're going to be collaborative.
Exactly.
They are going to be working together.
Yep.
The community will be more resilient.
Yep.
So when you do get things like, I know there's been double glazing companies shutting all over the place in the valleys, and that's had a huge impact. Tata Steel shutting. But then there's resilience throughout that, and they can cope. So that's great. Thank you. So, what responsibility does your role carry in protecting that future, Andy? No pressure.
Well, I mean, much the same as you. I mean, I work in the consultancy world, and the uncomfortable truth about consultancy is that you can be really busy and really ineffective at the same time. And I think my responsibility is to reject the vanity projects, those glossy strategies that you get asked to produce, which is going to be stuck on a shelf, or it's just a tick box exercise because they've got to do it for funding, or they've got to do it. And actually, to really try to think about, okay, how do I find the things to do which will genuinely change decisions? That's the crucial information, and I think this means being willing to tell clients uncomfortable truths if they need it, and I think it's not just those areas, because I also do freelance work, much the same as yourself.
Yeah.
So it's not all consultancy work, and I mean, I'm currently working for Abergavenny Food Festival. I'm doing some work with British Arts Festival Association. And I think I've been involved in sustainability and environment for almost in my entire career. And it's such an important, much the same as the act, it's an overarching part of what I am. So I believe my responsibility is if I'm contracted as a freelance to go and do some work for whoever it is to take that sustainability and environment element of where my knowledge is and where my beliefs are, and to incorporate it into that work, even if it's not necessarily directly contracted. Because actually it's so important that the businesses and society demand that we should be building it into there. So that's the two responsibility. One is rejecting those vanity projects. Secondly, it's incorporating it into all of my work, whatever I do. And then thirdly, outside of work, I've built up, a reasonable amount of knowledge now in this industry, and I think I have a duty to be able to share that knowledge and experience within my wider communities, whether it's my local community or it's my school community or whoever it is, to be able to share that knowledge. Because I think we all have a duty to think, okay, 10 years from now, 50 years from now, what do we want society to look like? And therefore, how do I help to do that in work and outside of work?
I think that's why we asked you to come on the show, because there's so many different people out there that do sustainability, but they just do it as in the role that they have to do, the project that they'd be given, and they don't know the actual impact it's going to do. I was much on the same journey as yourself. When I come into the freelance world, I was like, how do I deliver genuine work for what I'm trying to do? Because you can spend a lot of time, a lot of effort, and as you say, it can just land on a shelf, and it's there to get a tick box, and it's there to get funding, and that's there. I don't want to say quite a lot, but it's there enough for you to be wary of it and to pick those projects. And I think people who are actually active in sustainability and helping embed things like the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act are always scoping out the projects that they want to work with. And I think that's the nice thing that you're doing there. You've got the Abergavenny Food Festival, you've got the consultancy, and with sustainability, it's always evolving, as you definitely will know after the time you've spent and how quickly it changes. The things that when you first started were a good thing probably aren't a good thing now, because it's all moved on. And I think that is a challenge for our industries, to keep sharp, keep ahead of the curve, or with the curve probably, because every 6 months right now I'm rewriting workshops and changing things. But when you're passionate about it, it comes through.
I mean, it's interesting you say actually over the last 30 years that things have changed. And actually I think some of the solutions have changed, but a lot of the problems are exactly the same. I mean, I was looking at a book on in my home library called Green Business, which was written in 1988, and it's all about how it's an American book. It was written all about how businesses can make themselves greener, sustainably, and think about our environment. And almost every single thing they've identified in there as an issue is still happening now. Some to a greater degree than others. A lot of the solutions are exactly the same as they're proposing then. There's all now obviously a lot more technical solutions which have come on board, but it's still the same problems and issues that we've been looking at for the last 30 odd years. That can be frustrating, obviously. We should have taken more steps by now. But it also means that actually the solutions are there, because we've been looking at it for so long. So that's also the positive side of things. We can still make that change. We just got to ramp it up more quickly now than if we started 30 years ago, we would be in a much better place. It's that classic one, isn't it? How do I get to where I want it? Well, I wouldn't have started from here. If we'd started 30 years ago, we would be in a much better place. We still can get to that better place, but the speed of change now is vastly different. I think that's the challenge now, is how do we get to that place within a time frame which is manageable.
And I think that's a beautiful way to sort of lead me on to the next question, which is where are we still reacting instead of preventing? Now, you've sort of said, the same issues still are around, but now the pressure is on, because now we really are witnessing things all around us, whether that's our weather patterns, whether that's global instability, supply chains instabilities, pandemics, that all are related to the bigger problem with our world and the climate that we live in. So, where do you think we're still reacting instead of preventing?
I think the obvious one to pick would be flooding. We can't carry on rebuilding in the same places, and we call it resilience. We know that the cost of repairing damage after a major flood far outweighs the cost of any upland land management to reduce the impact. So we know that. With nature recovery, we go all, a species goes into decline or collapse, we go, oh my God, what are we going to do? Instead of actually investing in the prevention measures, which we know will protect it in the first place. And think about communities. We wait for economic crisis and parachute in regeneration funding. And it's instead, we need to be thinking about, but prevention is difficult. Prevention requires political courage. Because as you know, the benefits are invisible. If you've prevented something, how do you guarantee it? But the costs are immediate. Yeah. It can be very expensive, but you are preventing. And that is a very hard sell for any politician. Give me 20 million, I'm going to stop something happening. Well, how do you prove it? It's that's the real challenge, is how do we give politicians the license to be able to make those decisions for the future, which we are going to stop something happening. That's where we need to be doing it.
And I think this is what we're trying to do with GreenWales.
Yep.
Is trying to embed the Future Generations Act into everyday language, into everyday speaking. And, long term is one of those things where, as you just said, if politicians got 4 years to make a change, but actually the decision he needs to make is a 20-year decision.
Yep.
He's not going to be in office. His party probably might not be in office. They might come around again and back in again. But they're spending money for the future, which doesn't have an impact on the immediate population.
Yep.
And it's very difficult to get them things through. And we have the Future Generations Commission, which Derek Walker's doing a fantastic job. We are 10 years in, and I am seeing progress all over the place. But because of the pressing issues and the pressure behind our climate and our country at the moment, it feels like we really need to get a handle on this now. And that does mean making long-term decisions.
Yeah. And we see, you see a similar thing with the anti-vaccine debate, where now people, where there's a common thread. Well, we don't see smallpox anymore. Well, no, that's because vaccines prevented it. Well, we don't need vaccine anymore. No, so it's that the fact that you stop something, people then stop believing it actually would have happened. You remember the whole thing around the millennium bug, which who knows whether it happened or not. The fact is, we did a huge amount of work. I remember I was working for the Forestry Commission those days, and the amount of work we had to do in our computer systems to prevent that happening was huge. and nothing happened. And people go, well, look, you wasted all that money. No, that's the whole point of prevention, is stopping something happening. So it is a really hard sell, but it is crucial. And particularly with the environment now, with flooding or with any of those things I mentioned, we know it's going to happen again. We do know it's going to happen again. So we also know it's cheaper to stop it happening. Prevention is always cheaper than the cure. It's where we need to see political courage. We've got elections coming up fairly soon. We need political courage, and we need people to be asking questions of their potentially elected, their candidates, to say, what are you doing to prevent this thing happening? How are we going to prevent it happening? Not what we're going to do in the future.
And I think, the best thing the Senate has done in my eyes is the new system going forward, because it will, instead of having first past the post,
Yep.
you'll have a place where they all have to collaborate together.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that'll actually mean they represent the people better.
Yeah.
And hopefully the results of what will come through the next 4 years will be embedding the Future Generations Act, taking a collaborative approach, involving people, thinking of the long term, being preventative.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm really hoping to see. And then the Commissioner's got a fantastic starting point to hopefully influence and get those right decisions.
Yeah.
And we were sort of talking about the next one, which is what's a long-term trade-off we're not being honest about. And part of it is probably sacrificing in the short term to gain in the long term, and that difference in thinking. But is there anything you want to add, like what's a long-term trade-off we're not being honest about?
I think land use. I would highlight. I was thinking about this, before, and we cannot have intensive agriculture, rewilding, affordable housing, food security, carbon sequestration, all happening on the same acres. Some work together well, but not all. And I think it's there's a genuine tension between some of those, and we sometimes try and forget that it's happening. We'll just ignore that. And I think somebody's vision of Wales will win, and somebody else's vision of Wales will lose. And having that conversation with farmers, with local communities, with conservationists, with businesses is difficult. It can be uncomfortable, and we're avoiding it too often. And I think, there are some signs of that taking place. There are some good signs of it. But we need to be more open about it. We are facing a number of crises, and we all have a part to play, and we all know that the impacts will be felt on all of us. But in some communities, they'll be felt more than others. And how do we manage that? How do we recognise that and acknowledge it? And also acknowledge the fact that, things have changed over the years. It's a tough conversation, but I think it is one which we either avoid as a community, or we find simple solutions, or, a headline grabbing thing which, look at that, shiny thing over here. To help avoid those difficult conversations.
So it leads on to the next question beautifully, and it says, what does long-term thinking break down in practice, and what does that look like on the ground? And that could be done in a couple of different ways, in the work that you see, in the work that you're enacting right now, but also the sort of restrictions and things that you see in place when the long-term thinking does actually break down in practice.
I think, from experience, and I'm sure you found this as well, it's at budget setting time. Almost without fail, and that's not just governments; it's organisations. An organisation will set a 2045 or 2050 net zero commitment on a Monday, and by Thursday they've cut the very team who was charged with delivering it because of a short-term funding gap. And I don't think that long-term thinking fails because people don't care. It fails because short-term pressures are structural. They're built into the very life of what we do, whether it's a quarterly, the quarterly cycle, whether it's electoral cycle, whether it's annual budgets. Those short-term structural systems are by their very nature designed to fail anything long-term. And until we redesign those, long-term thinking will be decorative. Not always, and it's important we can't just throw out long-term strategies, but we have to recognise the fact that those short-term pressures are always, unless we can actually building better strength into it, we'll always try and derail those things. And I see, I see it at Abergavenny Food Festival at the moment. We are like many creative organisations, financially challenged at the moment, and that means that we have to make choices about some of the issues which we'd like to do differently. We can't do them just because financially it is just not viable. And that is frustrating because you have a goal, you have an idea, and you say, this is where we want to be, and then all of a sudden, how do you do that? And I think that is, let's be honest, there are always going to be funding issues. There's always going to be choices about what you do. But I think too often, unless sustainability is absolutely built in to your organisation, either because it is what you believe in as an organisation, or because you have to, because the law says you need to do this, it will always be one of those ones which will, we just won't do that because this is more important or this is more important. And I think that's, I'm a firm believer that legislation is one of the key ways in which we need to raise the bar. Too often we rely on organisations and individuals doing things because it's the right thing to do. And if you've got people doing things, if they do things right, it's great, but it means there's always going to be people who are going to undercut that. And I always use the example of the issue around health and safety and the Health and Safety Act, which was brought in 1964. It's up to that point, there'd been a hodgepodge of legislation around health and safety, various Mines Acts and Explosive Acts and various things, all tend to be fairly reactive. Something had happened, oh my God, we've got to do something, so they create a thing. And this is hodgepodge of things. And in the 10 years up to the enactment of the Health and Safety Act in the UK, in the 10 years leading up to that, there was a 75% increase, I think it was 75% increase in deaths and injuries in the workplace, just because of a whole range of things started happening. Industry was growing, massive changes, and because the rules and regulations were a hodgepodge, people could find their way through them. And eventually it got to 1994, and the UK government, to their ultimate credit, created the first Health and Safety Act, and which basically amalgamated all those systems into one. They said, this is the bar now. This is where you have to reach. You can't be here. You're here. Legally, you have to be here. And in the following years up to 2000, there was a 80% drop in deaths and injuries in UK businesses because suddenly everyone had to reach this bar. Now, I think we're in the same situation with, I mean, we've seen it actually with Wales Waste. Last year, 2 years ago, when the legislation was brought in for businesses to recycle, all of a sudden, businesses have been going, oh my God, we've got to do this now. It's now law. Now, all the organisations I've worked with, we've been ahead of the curve. We've been going, no, this is something which we need to do. We should be doing this. The right thing to do. But I would look around at other organisations going, why the hell aren't you doing this? Because it not only makes it difficult when, as an organisation, where if you're fighting for something in an organisation, and you're saying this is the right thing to do, and you've got other people going, well, yeah, we should be doing this instead. It's much more difficult if you say this is what we have to do. This is the law. There's much less flexibility of when you can make change. And I think it's the same now with a lot of the sustainability side of things. We have to get to the point where we say, actually, it's no good wanting people to do it because it's the right thing to do, because we just look what's happening. We can see not enough people are doing that. We know what we need to do. We now need to get legislation to back that up and actually start making it, this is what you have to do. Because if we don't, we're all going to suffer. We are all suffering now because not enough people are doing the right thing.
Yeah, and I think, if you think of large organisations like the NHS, local government, proper Welsh government, Senedd, all the people who have big supply chains, there's a huge opportunity for, I'm going to say a word, Scope 3, which is your emissions down at home, your emissions up and down your supply chain, because Scope 3 kind of freaks everybody out. But I think there's a massive opportunity for Scope 3 where if you went, okay, we're going to go hyperlocal, we're going to invest in, instead of one company to deliver these 10 things, we're going to invest in 15 companies.
Yep.
They're all going to grow. They're all going to get big contracts. Yeah, they're going to need some upfront investment, but that will tick so many boxes for prosperity, for long term,
absolutely.
for prevention. You get a more committed workforce because they're like, oh, the people I work for are there. And it just creates this community ecosystem of economy and environment all embedded together. And with all the legislation behind it that already exists, I just think it's a really exciting time. And this is one of the things I teach everybody. I'm going, if you can do your carbon footprint now, someone who produces a product in England or in Scotland or somewhere else in the world, you do literally the exact same thing, you'll be chosen because your carbon footprint will be lower, because your supply chain's lower. And they're going, oh my God. And I'm like, you don't have to reinvent the wheel, just do it in Wales. And we're going to win straight away. So it doesn't matter if you're engaged or not, they are easy wins for everybody. And this leads me on to a nice question, which is, if Wales fully embodied the spirit of the Future Generations Act, what would feel different day to day?
It's interesting. You've already touched on the thing which I think would look mostly different, which is procurement. I think what you would see is that all the major public contracts would be building local supply chains and chains and skills, and not buying the cheapest thing because that's all the money we've got. And also, I think what you would find is planning would be factoring in decisions looking at 2050 rather than just 2027. I think, but crucially, the citizens would feel that change. There would be a tangible sense that public organisations were making decisions with them, not for them or to them. Crucially, not to them. The Act is a groundbreaking, world-beating Act, but we still aren't fully living in it yet, and I think there is still there is more to be done to actually make it fully to deliver what it was set out to do. And that's not surprising. It was very ambitious, very, very ambitious. But we are seeing some of the some of the changes now. We are seeing some of the benefits coming through, and I think the opportunity and the ambition should be, how do we fully embed that? So that citizens are seeing, this is a good thing, and we see it being it's now being copied in other parts of the world. So it's all other places can see, wow, this is a great act. This is a really good thing we should be doing. Wales now needs to say, right, keep on leading and saying, look, here's what we've done over the last 10 years. This is where we are now. We're still changing things. We're still adapting. We're still learning how to make it work, and sharing that knowledge.
And I think what you said there, which sort of hits the nail on the head, all people want to do is feel change. They just want to see it happen. And that's with politics. That's with when people come into power, they go, you get us in, you're going to feel it. And I think what we've lacked since definitely for me in the last 20 years is we've just felt the opposite. You've just felt you're losing your sector, you're losing your services, you're losing so many things all around you. And I think the Wellbeing Future Generations Act is going to take a while to bed in. We've had 10 years now. I can see it starting to actually bedding in our decisions. The next 10 years is vital to actually see it starting to be delivered. Because if it starts to be delivered, we're all going to start feeling it. And the way that we live will be different to everybody else around the UK and all over the world. And you say there's interest coming in from internationally because they're seeing those high-level changes happening, going, that's amazing. But, we need to get down to that grassroots now, which I can happily report that I am seeing. There's a project called the Grange Project. Literally, the whole business is written up to follow the Future Generations Act through and through. I'm seeing them in June. I'm so excited to go and see them. I've done it just for my birthday, so it's like a little bit of a holiday to myself because I'm so excited to see these projects. I've seen Green Space SOS, where they're working with Valleys to Coast, which is a housing association, and they're embedding otter hides and nature walks all next to the people who are in maximum depravity and not doing well in society. Bless, and this support's coming through the housing association to connect them to it. Really inspiring. Like I was so blown away that day. I had to stop halfway home and just reflect on it because it was so impactful. There was another project, it's gone. But the whole point is that there's so many projects happening. I could say Coffee of Flowers, they're all about addressing mental health, but they're bringing business back to the valleys. You've got more. There's more. There's so many more, and I think that's what's inspiring.
Yeah, and you're right, and I think it's how do we? Well, there's two elements. One is how do we ensure that those projects which are now blossoming, that people know that it's as a result of something that happened 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, if we don't make those connections, we end up, people just go, well, it's just happening.
Yeah.
And so it's building that it's ensuring that people, so we keep on talking about this is what we're trying to do, this is why we're doing it, and look, here's some of the changes. But I think the other thing, and this is a tension which always struggling with, is how do you build hope and sell a vision of the future, which is hope, which is ambitious and is people can really get behind, without over promising and under delivering. I've always been a believer in under promising and over deliver.
Yeah.
It's otherwise you just build in despair and despondency, and people just go, well, it's just another thing they've just said.
The project, isn't it?
Exactly.
That you're trying to do, yeah.
So it's how do you keep that? How do you keep that balance? And I think part of that is by demonstrating, by making sure those, the things you're doing here with your program is going. This project happened partly because this legislation was put in place 10 years ago. This project happened because of that. Now, if we grow that on scale, then we can get to that vision that we were talking about 10 years ago. Because all of a sudden you can see small micro businesses locally investing, the benefits staying within the communities, people building up jobs, feeling secure in their local areas, is a direct benefit from that, what that act was trying to do. So it's about how do we hold the course? We have elections coming up fairly soon. How do we hold the course? Because it will be very easy for people to say, oh, that's just not working. Check it out. Let's try something new. Long-term strategies, as we've talked about, need a long-term investment, long-term vision, and they take a long term to deliver. And that means you've got to hold with it.
Yeah, and I do think we're at a sort of risky time at the moment where we are 10 years into this act, and if certain things happen, we could lose the commissioner.
Yeah.
We could, and that for me is very scary to sort of see happening, because that would derail the whole project in its own right. And thank you for saying what you said about the channel, and the whole point of this series is to sort of bring the higher level discussions. We've got the grassroots series, which brings the lower level discussions. We bring it together so the masses understand what we're trying to do here. Everybody gets behind it, which means no matter what happens, you cannot take this away from Wales, because it is a unique identity for what we have and what we're trying to do. It's a unique experiment in some ways, but I think it's an amazing experiment, and it's one that we should all be, I say we should all be getting behind. We are getting behind. A lot of us don't realise that we are. Some of the interviews I have, they tell me what they're doing. I'm like, I make the connection for them. But I love that, because that's like passive consultancy. That's that sort of interview, and I'm like, that's great, because knowledge is power, and it's all about sharing. So if someone was to watch this conversation in 30 years' time, what, if I said one decision, could Wales make that you'd hope they'd make today?
I'd hope that they would see a Wales that had truly invested in its youth. Actually backed it and seen them as the asset that they actually are, backing them with resources, with land, with all sorts of support, and with trust. Because the person who's 15 now is going to be looking at what we have. They're going to inherit whatever we built and whatever we've neglected. And I hope that when they look back, they can see that the adults in the room now took that seriously and actually thought about how do we ensure that those young people have the best future that they can possibly have. And that's what I hope that we look back on and say, yes, Wales took youth seriously, actually involved them in decisions, actually gave them a proper stake in society. And actually, it's interesting, we have that this year.
Yeah.
The first time, 16-year-olds are going to be voting. And it's a fascinating experiment. What the 16-year-olds know, I mean, my son is 16, soon to turn 17, and he has very strong views about all sorts of things, informed by, his school, his college, what he's learnt through us, his own experiences, what he reads, what he watches. He is perfectly capable of making some serious decisions about life. And absolutely, they should be involved. And we have to trust them. And it doesn't mean to say just, checking them out there and off you go. It means supporting and trusting and giving them resources and advice so that they actually are, fully functioning and able to perform within society. And as I said, they are going to be dealing with whatever we leave behind. And at the moment, it doesn't look great. We have an opportunity still to change that.
And what I'm hoping to sort of see, and I'm starting to see, my daughter's 8. She's in the primary school at the moment, and the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act has been embedded through her education.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And her education, compared to my education, is very different.
Yeah.
She has a full-time forest school teacher. They have lessons every week. I always reflect back and going, oh my goodness, I didn't connect with nature and sustainability until I was about 30.
Mm-hmm.
It took me a long time because of the job I had before and when I retrained in. She's doing that from the age of 5.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited to see her opinions, her views on the world, because I think she will be much more rounded compared to myself. I was in Victorian playgrounds where it's just all tarmac.
Yeah.
The whole thing was tarmac with chalk on the road.
Yeah.
And that's very common
Yeah.
in South Wales. So I know at the moment secondary schools are in the middle of developing that. They have their own set of challenges, secondary schools at the moment, and I think it's that those early years are absolutely vital to the prosperity of the next generation coming through. So I'm just hoping in the next 5-10 years we see that second part of the secondary schools really embedding the Future Generations Act, and hopefully then we're creating something that the next adults of the world will have the support they need. But as you say, it's what we do now and how we act now is the most important thing for the next 30 years. And I think that's why a lot of people, especially since COVID, because people had time to reflect, a lot of the businesses I talked to started up post-COVID because they had that time in nature, they had that time out of the working cycle, the common working cycle, which is get up, go to work, coming home, your weekend, it's all very controlled, and people are going, don't need to do that anymore. Working from home, having Teams and Zooms and the other providers out there, which there are many, but it opens up. I was talking to Jane Davidson a few weeks ago, saying Cardigan has had an explosion in its population because people are now going there to work because they only got to go to London once or twice a week. So I think there's a huge appreciation coming for our natural landscapes now, and then that's inspiring all new businesses and opportunities. So I'm just hoping it ramps up as quickly as physically possible, which is what I'm trying to do and trying to help that. And this leads me on beautifully to, and this is the nice part for you, okay? And I normally say 1, but if you're really passionate, you're like, I've got at least 6. I'll let you have 3, So is there a project or organisation in your orbit that you think is quietly doing brilliant work that GreenWales should go and see?
Yes, I think there are, and you've given me an option for 3, so I'm going to take you up for 3.
Okay.
And you may already have done these ones, so you have to forgive me.
No,
so
fine.
Egni Co-op in Pembrokeshire. Great local community energy organisation, really doing great things and investing. All the money is getting back invested in the community.
Fantastic.
So really nice, small project, really going well. On a bigger scale is the Natur am Bydd, which is the Natural Resources Wales working with 9 environmental charities to genuinely look at what would a nature positive Wales look like. And I know you've interviewed NRW, so I hope they talked about it or will talk about it coming up. But that is a genuine, real, at scale project. And we need things micro and we need things at scale as well. And I think then the third one, which is run by a friend of mine, so full disclosure, his name is Andrew Williams, and he runs an organisation called the Arc of Taste. Ooh. And it's about creating a space which preserves things like old recipes or old seeds, seeds which are going out, so it's creating that the word arc obviously about preservation, And for instance, the Monmouthshire pudding is in the Ark of Taste because no one makes it anymore, and it's an amazing recipe which uses ingredients which are local to Monmouthshire or to Wales, and therefore you create this space which actually is about embedding food culture within the environment. So those are my three.
It's like that's amazing, and it's such a varied three. And the last one especially, I'm just like, because you get the seed banks that save all the seeds, but he's more culture.
It's combining all three. It's both growing things, but also what you're making out of them afterwards, and the cultural implications of preserving that.
We have to put him in touch with Wales Seed Hub. Or the Incredible Seed Library.
He might, I suspect he probably is. But
pretty sure, which is great.
But always good to double check.
And it shows great collaboration across Wales already. There's only one thing for you to do. One is to say thank you very much for coming on the show. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thanks for inviting me.
It's been amazing, and I'm so glad you said yes. So at the end of the show, we invite everybody to become part of the GreenWales Collective. We don't do a membership because I just don't believe in memberships. The collective, this is going to be yours, is the GreenWales badge. I'll do it to camera. So this is yours, and it's just to signify that you're doing genuine work, you're genuinely delivering for Wales, and you're embedding the future generations actually work. And all we say is thank you, wear it with pride, make a little post for us, and we'll really appreciate it.
Marvellous, thank you. Thanks very much.
My pleasure. Thank you very much, Andy. This is Wales, building a better future together. Big thanks to Avango Powering Sustainable Productions for making this possible. You're watching GreenWales, Wales Future First. If you believe in the future of Wales, support it. Like, comment, and subscribe.